So today's session is on job descriptions. And before we get there, I'm just going to kind of remind everyone of the first few steps in building out TouchStone and a little bit about how TouchStone's organized, which is related to how to build job descriptions. So in the first session a few weeks ago, we talked about building your 4 key functions. So making a list of all the processes. This is an important step to do because when you get to building the job descriptions, it's very easy to build the job descriptions if your 4 functions list has been done. And you'll see what I mean by that in a minute here. So build out your 4 key functions. Make a list of all the processes. Organize them by category and list them out. Even if you don't go in and do the documentation right away, it's not necessary that you do that in this first step. Just make a master list. Then go and build your organization chart. So like we talked about last week, thinking into the future, thinking about the vision of your business, building a chart as a picture of that business in the future. So it becomes like a map on how you're going to get there. It becomes a hiring plan, becomes a way to gauge profitability, do budgeting because you can understand who you're going to hire and when and what sales need to be in order to make that happen. So build this out as a strategic tool, a vision of the future. Once your org chart is done, then you can go and build all your job descriptions. So how the job descriptions are built is we look over at the 4 functions list over here and we assign processes to boxes on the chart. So every process in the 4 functions over here in one place or another will be linked to a box on the organization chart. Another way to say it is you're assigning accountability for all of this work to the positions on the org chart who are responsible for that work. When you click a box from the chart, it takes you to the job description. So this job description has been built, obviously. You'll see all the processes. These processes all live in the 4 functions list. So they're organized by category over here, subject area, and then they're linked to the positions who are responsible for them. When I click a process here from the job description, it takes me here, which is where the documentation for that process is created. So using these tools over here, these templates, we go through and document, in this example, how one-on-one meetings happen. Then the process, the documented process, is then linked to whoever's accountable for doing that work. When I click a process here again, you can see from this breadcrumb trail where it is on the 4 functions list. So this trail is a good thing to get familiar with because it allows you to toggle back and forth between the 4 functions list and the process quite easily. And then it also, when you click a process from a job description, it shows you exactly where that process is on the 4 functions list. In addition, using this toolbar item right here called Link to Job Description, I can see which job descriptions this process has been linked to. So we're going to come back to this tool in a minute, but I just want you to see from the process page itself, the process tools page, right here, you can see what job description it's been linked to, and from right here, you can see where it is on the 4 functions list. Okay, so first we're going to talk about technically how to build job descriptions, so how to use the functionality. And then I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about how to use job descriptions. So how to manage employees with job descriptions, how to use that as a primary management tool. So I'm going to add a box right here to the org chart and put it underneath a position. Remember, this is what this means. You want to say who manages this position I'm about to add. Then I hit save. So now we have a new box added to the chart. When I select this box, it takes me to the job description. So this is what it looks like when it hasn't been built yet. Job descriptions have 2 sections. There's strategic and tactical. So how we define this is strategic is strategy work, higher level work, management work, getting results through other people. Another way to define management work. So this is a strategic strategy work, managerial work. So a managerial position, someone who manages another person, is going to have mostly strategic work and less tactical work, if any. Tactical is the technical work of the position, the staff work. So it's the processes used to get the work done, basically. So you're not evaluating anything here, you're doing the work itself. So that's tactical. So a tactical position that doesn't manage anyone else is probably going to have mostly tactical processes. You may have a few strategic things. One strategic process I like for everyone's job description is time management. That's a good one, and you can find that in our library inside of Guiding the Business. Another one is process innovation. So that process is also in the library in the Guiding the Business area, and it basically simply says that it's everybody's job to make sure that you're doing the work in the best way possible, and that if it can be innovated and made better, everyone should pay attention to that and provide feedback for their ideas. So those are two strategic processes I think are good for every tactical position. But it's fine for a tactical position to have no strategic processes. So strategic and tactical. You can see further definitions of these two sections of the job description here in the Resource Center. If you go to frequently asked questions or you just search strategic, you'll see definitions in there if you want kind of a more detailed definition or you can't remember what I said. Now, having said all that, this is your TouchStone account. So you can define strategic and tactical in any way that you want, any way that works for you. There's no harm in redefining it and providing your own way to organize. Generally speaking, strategic work comes from this function. So that's another thing to keep in mind. The Guiding the Business function is full of strategy and managerial work. So most of this work is going to get linked to a strategic section of a job description. All right, let's go back. Just starting here at the top, if you want to edit the title of a position, you just click it. 9 times out of 10, if you want to edit something in TouchStone, if it's not a fixed field like this one, you can't edit strategic, then you just click right on it and it's going to open for you to edit. Underneath the title is what we call the objective, and this is what it looks like when it's blank. If I click on it, this is where you put in a sentence or a phrase on what's the purpose of this position. Why does it exist? What is it here to do? These can be multiple sentences if you like it that way. Another thing I've seen is like the key results of the position, if I could spell. The 3 primary results. So you don't want to get into describing how to do things here in the objective field, but if you want to put in what is the overall result or the purpose of the position. If you want to bullet point those or list them into the 3 key main things that the position is here to do, you can do that, or you can write it out in a sentence or a phrase and then save it. That's what this field is for. You don't want to put paragraphs of information in this field. If it gets to be more than a paragraph, then you want to sit and look at it and say, am I really getting into describing how to do things as opposed to just saying what is the result? So that's what this objective field is for. Right above the title, there's this icon here, which allows you to remove processes from a job description. So once we've added a few here, I'll go back and show you exactly what this looks like, but that's what the X means. There's also this toolbar item here, which is the export arrow, and you're going to see this export arrow all throughout TouchStone. Everything in TouchStone exports, mainly with these 4 functions. Print, which means you send it directly to your printer. So now TouchStone's just loaded my printer settings here, and you can see the job description right here. when you're printing something directly, TouchStone doesn't control your printer settings. So if you want to change the layout, if you want to get rid of the web, I have mine disabled, but if you don't have that setting disabled, sometimes a web address is going to show up here at the bottom. So anything you want to do to change the layout or what's on this actual print screen, you're going to go into your printer settings and do that. You can also print a Word. So this toolbar item will just launch Word. It's opening here down at the bottom of my screen. If I click on it, it's just going to open Word, and then you'll see the job description in Word. It also prints to a PDF. So this is, not a writable format. The PDF has more of like a polished look and feel to it, whereas the Word export is something you could edit and change. And you can also email it. Email the job description. If you click this field, I'm just going to put in the to and the from, and it makes you put a subject, so that helps it not going to spam. And then you can even put a message. In addition to the normal export features, here on the job description page, we also have this function which allows you to print the operating manual for the position. So what that'll do is it's going to print the job description, which is like a table of contents for the operating manual. So let's go to a built job description so you can get more of a feel for that. So this is a table of contents for the operating manual for this position called Manager of Marketing and Sales. This is everything that this position does. And furthermore, it's got the how-tos for every process as well, once you've documented that. So inside of every one of these processes, I have all work plans, checklists, scripts, everything which explains how to do performance reviews. So that's what I mean by it's a table of contents for the operating manual. So if we go here and export the operating manual to Word or print it, so this is printing it directly to the printer, or this is exporting it to Word, TouchStone's going to print the job description, and then it's going to print every tool inside of every process in order. So it's going to go in every process and print work plans, checklists, all of it. The only thing it won't print is uploaded files and video and audio files, because clearly those aren't printable. The uploaded files are in different formats. So it could be a spreadsheet. It'll show a placeholder for it, so the person who's looking at it knows that it's there, but that won't print. So this is kind of a nice feature if you ever need an external operating manual for the position, paper copy for whatever reason. All right, so let's go back to this position. So to build the job descriptions, you use this toolbar item here called Add Existing Process. It's called Add Existing Process because the processes that you're going to add to the job description already exist over here on the For Functions list. So if I click this Add Existing Process, the first thing I have to decide is the processes I'm going to add, do I want them in the strategic or the tactical section of the job description? So if it's a managerial position, then start with strategic, and then go where it says subfunction and hit the drop down. Now I'm looking at all the subfunctions from my For Functions list. So you'll see your subfunctions here. And this is where we're going to look through the subfunctions and decide what processes we want to link to this position. So if this is a managerial position, I might look at strategy and decide, is there anything here from the strategy list that this position is accountable for? If I decide there is, then I select the process. And if I hold my control key down, then I can choose multiple processes at the same time. I can even skip this one and go to this one. So once I'm happy with what I'm choosing here, I just hit save. And now TouchStone has linked these processes, the ones I've selected, from the For Functions list to this position, to this job description. So then I would go back, Add Existing Process, and then go back to the subfunctions and look at the next subfunction. So this is, let's assume this is a sales position, a managerial sales position. I'll know that I probably don't need to look in finance because this is a sales position. So I might go right to sales. So think about what the position is, and then that's going to help you decide what sub-function to look in to find the work of this position. You can go and look through every one if you want and just glance through them, but 9 times out of 10, whatever this department this is in, the processes related to that are going to be inside of it. So I choose the ones I want to add, and I hit save. So that's how you build the job descriptions. You're looking over at the 4 functions list, and you're adding the processes that each position is accountable for. So if someone's asking a question about adding multiple process or adding the same process to multiple positions. So yes, definitely. If we look back here at the org chart, this is just a quick example. These are all management positions here, everything that says manager. So management work, the work that they use to manage people, those processes are all going to be linked to these managerial positions. So if I click on manager, marketing, and sales, for example, performance review, that may be done by every manager. So this process would be linked to every manager's job description. So the answer to the question is yes, you can take one process and link it to multiple positions if that process is the accountability of multiple positions. Another situation is if you have a process that part of it is done by one position, maybe this one, and then part of it is done by this position. So you may have multiple work plans within it. Some are the accountability of the marketing assistant, and some are the accountability of the customer service position. So that particular process would get linked to both positions. And then within the process, it would be either obvious who does what, or you would list it out in the instructions of the process. You can even put it in the title, who does what. Okay, so let's go back here. Another way to get processes on job descriptions is to use this toolbar item here called Add New Process. So this toolbar item will allow you to add a brand new process to TouchStone and to the job description. So this would be for a process that doesn't exist on the 4 functions list anymore. And it is one that you want to add. So you've looked at the job description and you've noticed that there's one missing. That's a common reason to use this toolbar item. So if I select this, then I choose strategic or tactical again. And then I put in the process name. And then I tell TouchStone which sub-function to put it in on the 4 functions list. So when I hit the drop down here, I'll choose the sub-function that I want to put this process in. So even though we're adding this directly to the job description, TouchStone still is forcing you to keep the 4 functions list accurate, because that's always the place where you're going to be able to see every process in TouchStone. So think about what category this work belongs in, and then hit save. So now you'll see the process titles appeared right here, the one I just added. And if I select this, you'll see it's been put on the 4 functions list. And I can see from this breadcrumb trail where it is. So add new process, that allows you to add a brand new process to TouchStone. It links it directly to the job description and then also adds it to the 4 functions list. All the processes are drag and drop on the screen too, so I can pull these up and pull them down to adjust the order. I can also pull from strategic to tactical as well, so you can reorder like this if you want. To delete a process, I'm just going to go over this toolbar item again. I click the X, and then I'm going to see these big red buttons next to the process titles. And if I hit remove, TouchStone's going to say, are you sure? And then I say, okay, and then that process is gone from the job description. It's called remove because it's taking it off the job description. It's not deleting it from TouchStone. So if we go back here to the 4 functions list and back here to guiding, that process I added, this one, is still here. The only way to get rid of it for good is to pull it to the delete folder and then hit delete. Now it's gone for good. So remember, if you're adding processes to job descriptions, or you're looking at a job description and you say, this process doesn't exist anymore, I don't want it anymore, it's not sufficient just to delete it from the job description or remove it from the job description. You're going to want to go and actually delete it from the for functions list as well. Someone's asking a question, is there a way to show the sub-functions the process belong to on the job description? That's a good question, but not from the job description. So the job description's got these two sections, strategic and tactical. The processes are linked from sub-functions. So the only way to really see it is to click the process, and then you see it on this breadcrumb trail. This is in the strategy sub-function. Now on the dashboard, I'm just going to jump here because I think this is going to make sense to this question. The dashboard this is the front end of TouchStone where employees would log in and use and access their processes. So here on the dashboard, when I click this position, I'm now seeing my job description. So all of these processes here are the same processes that have been put on the job description in how I was just showing you. So these are all the processes linked to the manager of marketing and sales job description. Here in the dashboard, I can create these work groups. So if you wanted to mimic how the for functions list is for that position, you could use the same sub-functions that the work is in. But I think a better way to do it is to think more about how does this position use the work. So like here I've got, this is all my management work, this is my employee training work. Now these are sub-functions on the for functions list, so those could be good ones for a managerial position. But then there's like this end of the month, and I could put the processes that I do at the end of the month into that. Here's like strategy work, marketing strategy, on demand. This is a good group title. This means like processes that you need them when you need them, but it's not rudimentary work. It's not stuff you do all the time. It might be like a knowledge base like this one is, where there's information that you could access when you need it, but it's not all the time. And then this group you can kind of put towards the bottom because it's not used that much, but it's still here. These processes are still here if someone needs them. So these groups, or that could mimic some functions, really are designed here on the dashboard. So let's go back to the org chart. Someone's asking, can you recover a process on a job description if you deleted it? If you delete it from the job description, then it is gone from that job description. So here are the processes. If I hit this remove X, and then I go and remove this process, and I say OK, now that process is removed from this job description. The only way to recover it would be to add it back to the job description. That process I just deleted, like I could remove all of these, and I don't really care because they're all in the for functions list. So I can add them back at any time that I want. So if you want to remove them, it's completely fine. Then you just go and add them back from the for functions list. Okay. Someone's showing me an error that they're getting. I'm going to leave that. Lord, I'm going to leave that question. I'll help you with that. I'm not quite sure what that error message is, but we'll take care of it. Possibly after the webinar, I can contact you and figure out what's going on with that. Okay. Well, I'm sorry. I'm just going to read a little bit further here because it might be something that's interesting to people. When you add a process to an existing position, that's the error you're getting. There's a little bug that's been going on where if I go add existing process and then I choose a subfunction and then I hit save and I haven't clicked anything, I get that error. So that's what your error is. So what's happening is you're not selecting. So let me do it slower. Add existing process, subfunction drop down. I choose the subfunction. Now I have to choose, I'm clicked on this process. I have to click, and then save. Now it's added those processes. If I go to add existing, and then I choose a subfunction, and I don't click any processes, and I go save, I'm going to get this message. So this is we need to put like a real error message there so people understand what happened. But what's happening to you is you're just not selecting the processes. You're just clicking save. Okay. So with your job descriptions, the best way to go about it is to start, one box at a time and just build them. Go add existing process, go to the 4 key functions, choose, add, save, and then once the job description is built, then analyze it. So look at it and say, okay, this is the sales position or whatever position it is. They do this, they do this. I can even put these in alphabetical order or organize them in some way so it's easier for me to see. You can do workflow order if you want. And then ask yourself, is there anything missing? Is there any work that we missed? And sometimes this happens because when you build out your 4 functions list, it's not always perfect. So look at it and from this perspective. Look at it from the perspective of what this position does. When you're building your 4 functions, you're thinking of subject area. You're thinking of the work, and you're not necessarily thinking, or you shouldn't be thinking about who does what during this exercise. Here, when you build the job descriptions, you are going to start thinking who does what, who's accountable for what processes. Once you build the job descriptions and you look at it from the perspective of the position, it's easier to see what's missing. If you see any work missing that you've forgotten, then go add new process and add it. Once the job descriptions look complete to you, or that particular job description, then go back and do the next one. It's pretty fast to build the job descriptions if your 4 functions lists have been done. It's pretty easy because you just are linking, and that's it. Where it becomes tricky is when you haven't really done your 4 functions list thoroughly, and then you start to link, and then you notice a lot's missing. But still, it's not a big deal. Just go add new process and add it. All right. When I click a process, I just want to remind everyone of this. I can choose link to job description, and this is another way I can double check that all of my processes have been linked to the correct positions. So it's a good exercise after you've finished building all your job descriptions to go through each process. So what I mean by that is click it and then just go link to job description and make sure it's on the right job descriptions. Sometimes you miss things, or sometimes you add a process and it really shouldn't be there, or you see a position that should have it and doesn't. So this is a quick way to review that. And if I see one missing, I just select it from this screen, choose strategic or tactical, and I hit link. So now it's on this job description. Or if I see I linked it to a job description and I don't want it on there anymore, or that was a mistake, I just choose this and now it's removed it. It's not orange anymore. So this is just a good way to do an audit of your job descriptions. Go through every process, choose this one. This is that department and company innovation process I was talking about in the beginning. This is provide input and feedback to management so the processes and results of the department become more efficient and effective. This is a good process. This one's in the library inside of guiding the business if you're interested in it. So I'd hit this, link to job description, make sure it's on all the job descriptions that it needs to be on, close it out, hit the back button, go to the next process. It takes a few seconds per process, maybe 5, but it's worth doing because you're just double checking that you've got the correct processes on the right job descriptions. Okay, so let's talk about how to use job descriptions. I want to make, I'll go there in a second, but I just wanted to make one other quick point. When you delete a box from the org chart, So I'm going to delete this box right here. If I go to the X and delete it, the job description will be deleted as well. So when the box is gone, the job description's gone. So just something to remember about deleting positions. I think that's hopefully obvious to people. But if I delete this box, then that job description I built is gone. All the processes aren't gone, just to make that point again. They're on the 4 functions list. They only get deleted from TouchStone when they're deleted from here. So if I hit X and then I choose this position and I hit delete, that box is gone and that job description is gone. So be mindful of that. All right. A few more just tactical things, and then we'll talk about how to use job descriptions. If you've got levels within your organization like this one that I was talking about in the organizational strategy session, this is a good kind of way to build your org chart with a hierarchy, entry level, then they move up here, then they move up here, then here's the manager. One point about job descriptions related to these levels within the organization. If I'm the manager of operations, it's implied, it's assumed that I know how to do the work of the positions underneath me. I'm responsible for that work. I'm responsible for making sure that these people do it. So all of their work does not need to be on my job description. It's implied that I'm accountable for that work getting done. So I see this sometimes where you look at a managerial position and there is like 50 processes on it or 100 processes. And what the person's doing is they're linking all the work of these positions underneath to this manager with the thought being, well, they're responsible for it, so they should have it. So don't think about it that way. Think about the manager is accountable for making sure all these people are doing their work. If I, as the manager, need to look at the work that the senior tech's doing because I have to fill in for that person that day, I just look at that job description. I don't need to have all this work on my job description. So think about that. And the levels are the same. So if I'm the apprentice, I have work I have to learn as the apprentice here. Then when I move up to lead tech, I don't need all the apprentice's work on the lead tech as well. If I don't have any part of that work once I've moved up to the lead tech. The lead tech can always have access to these processes and be able to see how that work is done or remind themselves of how to do it just by looking at this particular job description. So all of this work doesn't need to be here, and all of this work doesn't need to be here. All right. So if that's confusing to anyone, send me an email, and I'm glad to sit with you and look at your org chart and kind of look at it real time with you to help it make sense. What you want with your job descriptions is them to be clean, accurate, simple. We don't want them to be cluttered up with tons of work that isn't really relevant. So make them crisp and clean. Make them simple and easy to see, just the work that's relevant. So let's talk about how to use job descriptions. So my career spans 20 years of business development, being a consultant and then working on building out processes and creating process-dependent businesses. I've been a manager for most of those years. Job descriptions, to me, are the primary management tool that I use in all situations and all circumstances. What the job description really is it's a clear, accurate picture of what my employees need to be doing, what I need to teach them how to do, what I need to follow up with them about, what I need to manage their results by, how I need to communicate to them. All of it is depicted in this job description. So what I love about the job descriptions, particularly the ones in TouchStone, is that it makes it very tangible. A lot of times management can be just a very fluid, difficult thing when you're trying to kind of manage people with no training and really in a way forcing them to kind of make it up as they go along. That's very difficult because it's not fair to then look at that person and say, well, you're not succeeding, when the manager hasn't really been accountable for showing them how to succeed in a tangible way. Not just, I told you so, but here, let me show you. So the job description fills that purpose in management. So there, in management, just to break it down simply, there's new employee training, which is essential. And a lot of employees in small businesses never get new employee training. So that makes their jobs, 100 times more difficult. So new employee training and then ongoing training. The job description is key for both of those purposes, both of those management purposes. For new employee training, I use this like a checklist, and I'm actually going to show you here in Management Review on the dashboard how you can actually check it. So for a sales assistant that I just hire, this is my checklist for what they need to be trained in. So I go one process at a time and give them a training. How we do time management here and the tools we use for that and what we do to follow that process. How to clock hours, how to do sales follow-up, how to do an advertising plan, how to set appointments. So I go through one process at a time and train that employee in how to do that work. Sounds simple, right? It's beautiful when it works that way. There are always going to be things with every position where it's not documented, or you can't document that because I just did that yesterday, but I'm never going to do it again. So if your mind's going to things like that, let go of those variables and focus on what is consistent, because the majority of what all employees do, whether you want to believe it or not, is rudimentary and consistent. Some of it's more complicated than others based on what kind of industry and work that they do, but the majority of it is consistent. So let go of the variables and think about what's consistent. So with this job description, I as a manager can look at it and say, well, for a new employee, I'm going to teach them these processes. It's going to take me X number of hours to teach them how to clock hours. Let's say that takes 20 minutes. It's super easy, right? This is how you do it. Here's the work plan. Study it. Let me see you do it. Great. Sales follow-up, that might be longer. That might take, this is full of scripts and probably, a few work plans, a lot of standards around how we follow up. There might be a computer aspect of it where I have to put in appointments. So maybe this takes, 30 hours to learn sales follow-up. So as a manager, when you're thinking of new employee training, go through and try to guesstimate how long it takes to train someone in all these processes. When you add up all that time, and then you times it by what you're paying them, and then you add the management time, you add the overhead, then you've got a pretty good sense of what it's going to cost to hire a new employee, which is a fabulous thing to know. Because if we go back here to the organization chart and you're thinking about growing your business, going into the future, hiring new positions, if you can tell me exactly how long it's going to take to bring someone in here and how much money it's going to cost you, if the person is competent to then move up here and then to move up here, well, you've just unlocked part of the answer to how to juggle sales and marketing and operations, right? How long is it going to take you to scale it up? And the job descriptions are a key to that. They are everything you need for it. Another thing that's helpful with ongoing training, or new employee training, is that if I've hired someone and made a mistake, I'm going to be able to see it much sooner if I'm taking them through a step-by-step training like this, through every process. Because if I know that I hired 5 people last year and it took them 30 hours to learn this, and I've hired someone and they're just not getting it after 30 hours, or maybe even after 15, I know they're just not going to get it, well, then I can cut my losses with that person early and save a infinite amount of money. There's like statistics done all the time on the amount of money that's wasted by bad hires. So I can save the business money, and honestly, that person I've hired, you can save them a lot of time and frustration and issue. So this helps you kind of gauge, do you have the right person or not, which is key as a manager. We're always asking ourselves that. I mean, is this person going to be able to do it? Are they as good as this other person? This makes it tangible. So, new employee training. Again, I'm going to show you in the dashboard and management review before we end here how you can actually tick off these boxes in management review. Then ongoing training. So let's talk about that for a minute. So you've got existing employees. A lot of you who are new to TouchStone are just building your job descriptions. You may not even have all the documentation yet. And you're trying to take processes, documented processes, and implement them with people or employees who aren't used to that, like they've never seen it before, not used to have training. You're going to have some personalities who just gravitate to this and are like, oh, this is the best thing ever, because their mind works that way. And then you're going to have the old guard or other people who don't like it. They don't want it. They think it's a waste of time. They don't want to spend their effort on it. They'd rather not be seen that way. They want to kind of do their own thing. They don't want the accountability of being defined by processes. And that might be for a variety of reasons. But with employees like that, it's a challenge to kind of get this adopted. So push forward with it. Be diligent about it, because the implementation and the use of these processes is absolutely essential to the success of them, clearly. So this is some ways that I, for ongoing training, use job descriptions and use documented processes. If I've got a problem with an employee, I will refer back to the job description always. So if I've got someone who does sales follow-up and their follow-up rates are not as good as others, or I have some salespeople who have a much better conversion rate than others, or somebody hasn't been doing their to-do checklist that they're supposed to do every day, I would go back to the job description and say, okay, let's sit down and talk about this together. Let's look at the sales follow-up process. Let's discuss how you're using it. Are you following this step? I noticed here that this follow-up never happened. Let's talk about why. So let's look at the process and decide what's wrong with the process. Is the process not working? Is it not working for you? So you hear the tone of my voice is not, what's wrong with you? I told you 5 times yesterday to do the follow-up. I'm looking, you're not doing it. You don't listen to me. You're insubordinate. It's not personal. It's about the process. Let's discuss the process. It takes all the emotion and the angst out of management. I hate that other kind of management. It's terrible. It's terrible for the employee, and it's terrible for the manager, because it's all about blaming, like who's not doing it right, or you're not good enough. This type of management where you're managing with a job description, it's about the process. So I can take an employee by looking at the process and making it about that, and understand what they're capable of doing, what they're doing, and what they're doing well, and what they need help on. We may decide in the end that they just can't do sales follow-up, but we're making it the fault of the process. We're saying you're not following it, or how can I help you to follow it? Or sometimes the process just doesn't work, so let's change it. So the tone of management changes. Also, you can use the job description as a way of trying to understand how your employees are spending their time. So this is a common thing in management where you're looking at what that person's doing and saying, what do they do? And are they doing that? This is a frustration with management and with a lot of business owners. So this makes it tangible. You can talk about the times that you're supposed to be doing everything, how long it's taking. Are you doing it efficiently? So the job description helps with all those types of management issues as well. The job description helps with communication. So if I want to address something with an employee, or they're asking me a ton of questions about something and it's interrupting me and they're not quite taking ownership for figuring it out, I can refer back to the job description. So if I need to say to them, you're clocking in your hours wrong, go look at the process, go into the dashboard and make a note to me that you've read it and that you understand where you're going wrong with it. I don't even have to sit and have a meeting with them. I'm saying, go own it. Go to the process. Or if they need access to information. So this used to happen to me years ago where employees would just come knock on the door. What about this? I need this. Did you do this? Where is this? Nowadays, nobody knocks on my door because they know what they're going to get is, go look in TouchStone. It's right there. The documents are all there. Or you have this question. I know it's in that process because I wrote that process. So go look at the process. So no longer are you kind of being the answer man to everything that's happening with employees, because you're instead directing them back to where the content is. I was laughing with a TouchStone user last week because we ended up laughing about it, but they were complaining and saying, it's not worth the time to document this. It takes too much time. I'm too busy. I can't get to it. And we started to dissect how much time they'd been wasting over the years by not having that process. And that's when they started laughing, because, and all of you know it's true, if you think about it, the not having of the processes and not being able to manage with them has cost you so much time and money that even if it took 5 hours to document, it would just be worth it tenfold. So this is an example of how, just with management alone. The minute a manager changes their tone like that and makes the employee accountable for what they're responsible for, and they can do it in a very tangible way, like on a job description, the employee learns something new. It's like they learn a life skill almost, and it's redirected the whole business in a different direction. It takes time to get there, it takes them getting used to it, but it's completely worth it in the end. So a couple other, I can go on for hours on how to use job descriptions, but a few things I just want to point out, and one of them is the process of the week and how it works with the job description. So the process of the week that I've chosen is one-on-one meetings. And I'm not going to go into performance review, but I'm going to mention this one as well. So employee one-on-one meetings are very simple. And there's a process in the library called employee one-on-one meetings. This is a way that you communicate with your employees. Now, if you do this once a week, I think it's great. This says usually once a week. Even if you do it once a month, it's fine. It's better than nothing. So all that happens in these one-on-one meetings is that the manager makes time to sit down with that employee, even for a half an hour. An hour is good, but half an hour is fine too. You don't have time not to do meetings like this. So if that question of, I don't have time to sit and have a one-on-one meeting with every employee every week or every month is in your head, you don't have time not to do this, because this is essential for management. Sit down in that meeting, talk about how the work's going. Look at the job description. Go to the dashboard in TouchStone. Go to the org chart. Look at the job description. Talk about how the work is going. That's it. It could be as simple as, how are sales follow-up going? Or how did this project happen? How are you doing? How's your week been? So questions like that, where you have with them right in front of them while you're talking to them, are a great way to check in with your employees, but then to also reinforce the processes, reinforce the job description, have it be the way that you communicate. So there's a form inside this process where you can put, items to discuss, goals achieved, goals from last period, things to resolve, notes. So you can the manager can fill out all those information. It's like you're preparing the agenda, and save it back to TouchStone, and then call it up before the meeting. You can print it out if you must, or you can have it, on your phone or on your computer and look at the agenda and go through it. So this is, again, just about stopping for a minute and communicating with the employee. If you implement a meeting system like this, even if it's once a month, then you're going to start to do other time-saving things. Like you're going to say to yourself, I'm not going to go knock on their door or send them an email about that right now. I'm going to save it for the meeting. So you start saving things for the meeting, saving them for the meeting. Not big problems that have to be handled right away. I mean, put those in the variable category. Things that can wait for the meeting, save them for the meeting, because it's much more efficient to, rather than reacting, to sit and say, okay, there's this problem. Instead of just talking about it as we're walking down the hall, let's look at the process for that, or let's decide we need a process for that and make it more of a strategic thing in a meeting. So I'm going to mention performance reviews just here for a minute, and then we'll talk about how to use these things that I just showed you in the dashboard. So let me go back to this one. If you're using the job descriptions as a management tool, you're having your one-on-one meetings, this becomes kind of like an agenda for topics of conversation. Even in department meetings that you might be having for like the sales department, you can decide on like a process of the month if you want to. So every month you review one process on the job description, just as a way of checking in on the documentation. How's it going? Does anyone have any ideas on how it could be better? Great, it's perfect. Move on to the next agenda item. So doing things like that where you're discussing the processes in these one-on-one meetings or even in department meetings is great. So you're having your one-on-one meetings, you're using the job descriptions, and then you get to the end of the year where it's time for a performance review. The job description is the performance review. It's another cool thing about the job description. You can look at our performance review process in the Guide into Business library, and it steps you through this. Also in the Resource Center, there's a video on it as well, on how to use the performance review process. But basically, this is the performance review. So what we have you do is you take the job description, you literally copy and paste it into the performance review form, and then you give a rating on each of these processes. How have they been doing on sales follow-up? How have they been doing on setting appointments? How have they been doing on building strategic alliances? You give a rating and you put comments. Now, if you've been talking about this job description and these processes in your one-on-one meetings for an entire year, when you get to do the performance review, and all the performance review is just a recap of these processes, it's going to be so easy to fill that performance review out and to give it. There's going to be no surprises. They're going to know exactly where they're at, and it's going to be very tangible, which is the most difficult thing about performance reviews, making it tangible. Because if I don't have processes to refer to, if we haven't been discussing how you've been doing in a tangible way all year, when we get down to review time, it's just going to be whatever I can remember. And if I have to say difficult things and I can't back them up with actual real information, then I'm just kind of making it up. And that's a really difficult type of review to have with an employee. So performance review, that's the other way to kind of ultimately use this job description as a management tool. So let's go to the dashboard here. So first thing I want to show you is the new employee training piece. So if we go down here to this person, so I'm in management review right now, and since I'm Sam's manager, I see his job description. I see his control panel. So these are all the processes from the sales assistant's job description. And when Sam logs into TouchStone, he logs in with his own username and password, and he's going in and using and completing these processes. So if I'm doing new employee training for Sam, I'd start with his daily to-do list. So we go to this process. I say, look, Sam, here's the daily to-do checklist. This is how you do it. This is how you go through it. This is what it's here for. So I'm giving him a training, showing it to him, making sure he understands it. When I'm happy with his training, he's demonstrated that he understands how to use this checklist. I can put in notes. So these are, training notes that I could add if I wanted to add notes. And then I flip this box that says trained, and I save the note. Now if we go back, trained, okay, there it is. Now, if we go back to his management review list, then I go to the next process. Go down, hit trained all. I'm happy with his training. And then I go back, and then I see these check marks. For some reason, this one didn't save. But this is the green check is the indicator that he's been trained in that process. When he logs in, he sees the check and I see it as his manager. Then I go to the next process. I'm training him. I hit the train check mark and then he's trained in that process. So this is the new employee training. I go process by process in a timed way, give them a thorough training. You can even build tests into these processes using the custom form tool, which is kind of cool. Then the employee has to go in and take the test, and then you can review it here in management review. So I slowly check these off, and then when he's fully trained, there's going to be a green check mark next to every single one of these processes. So let's go back to the dashboard. So here's my control panel, and I'm going to show you the one-on-one meeting process. So here's that one-on-one meeting process. When I select this, I could go down to the custom form. So I'm going to prepare for a meeting for an employee. I can save this as their name. I have just a blank notes field here. I can put it, when I save this, a date and time stamps it, but I can put the meeting date if I want in here. Items to discuss, so these are the things that I want to go over with him. And then when I fill out this agenda form, then I save it. It's going to date and time stamp it, and it saves this form back to TouchStone. So then, after I've had the meeting, I'm preparing for the next meeting. I can go here to this completed folder, and I can look back at the meeting we did last week and remind myself of kind of what I want to do this week. And then I also see all the meeting forms that I've had with him over the year. When I'm doing performance reviews, I go back to TouchStone and look at all of these for the whole year. And any of them that have information in them about things that we talked about that are relative to the performance review, I have it all right here, easy to find and use. In addition, if my manager ever wants to know if I'm doing my meetings and how my employees are doing, so if we look back here at the org chart, so if this person wants to know how I'm doing with all of these people, they can go and run a report because they have management review of me, and they can see all the agenda forms and what happened and who's doing what and how the employee's doing, which is great because one of the best things about upper level management, or can be the best thing, is when you can see what's going on with all of these people without having to ask them or without having to be there all the time, or without there having to be a problem before you find out. So that's another way that these one-on-one meetings can be really useful. And then I'll just show you performance review since we have 2 more minutes here. So I'm back on my control panel for manager, marketing, and sales. So here's the performance review. So here I go to a performance review that I'm going to do for an employee. This one has a checklist in it that I might fill out. Here's the actual form itself. And then I go and fill this out for that employee. Put in their name. Here's where, and this happens on the process tools page, but this is where you cut and paste all the processes in from their job description. So this is the evaluation form. This is for the salesperson or whatever position it is. I go to their job description in TouchStone. I highlight, do right-click, copy, and then I paste the processes right in here. And then I give them a grade, based on how the rating is. We give you, if you use the library process, we give you this whole description here to use, which you can edit and make your own, but this is, I think, a pretty good way of doing it. And then you write in comments right here. Sometimes I cut and paste the comments from my one-on-one meeting forms too, because it's what I said 6 months ago is still relevant, and then I can cut and paste the comments in, and I can even say, we talked about this on this date and time. So these are all the processes from the job description, and you're just basically giving them a rating. Now there's our performance review form has other things in it. This one's not showing it, but it has like, long-term goals, and there's other stuff that can be relevant during a review, but this is really the heart of it. It's evaluating them on their processes, basically. So again, all this gets saved back to TouchStone. Once I save it, I can print it if you want a printed copy to file somewhere, but this review form itself is now saved back to TouchStone. And then a lot of times before I do reviews, I'll run a report to call up the reviews from last year. and then I can look at the review last year and use that to kind of inform this year as well. But what's nice about it is all this information is in TouchStone in one place, and it's not a scramble to kind of try to find where it all is. Any questions? Doesn't look like it. Next week, we're going to start to talk about documenting processes using the process tools. So I'll just go to this one as an example. We're going to start with work plans, checklists, and I believe scripts. It's hard for me to remember the agenda, but I think we cover these 3 in the first week, and then we cover the rest of them in the second week. So what I'm going to be talking about here is obviously technically how to use these different templates, to when to use them, why to use them, how the toolbar works, all the functionality up here that's relevant on this page. So we're going to be talking all about that, but then I'm also going to talk about what does a good work plan look like? How do you word things? What's enough detail and what's too much? So good kind of documentation ideas like that. So not just how to use all the tools, but how to do it in a quality way. I'll also discuss techniques for documentation, how to get it done over time, things like that. So if any of you on the line are managers and you've got employees that you want to be documenting processes in TouchStone, next week would be a good time to have them come on to the training session, ask questions if they want to, but basically learn how to use the process tools. Because this is really, if you have employees documenting, this is really all they need to know how to do, other than use the dashboard. They don't really need to know the 4 functions or how to use the org chart or even how to build job descriptions. All they really need to know is go to your job description, click that process, and build it. So the documentation tools are what they need to be trained in, basically. So that will be next week, and I'll look forward to it. Thanks for coming, everybody. Bye-bye.